Mm.
Larry, I think we are in a moment where a lot of people are going to realize that you, sir, are a genius. How are you today?
Doing well, Jason. Busy as usual, hectic, but fighting the fight. We cannot give up. Fight, fight, fight. In the words of Donald Trump, who's giving his 100-day rally today. It's quite interesting to hear what he has to say.
I think it's been a good 100 days, and they're pushing this whole entire fake story about how people aren't happy with Trump and the popularity rating is low. But what we really want to talk about today, Larry, is the federal judiciary. And I have to say, you and I have known each other for about 8 years, which is kind of a long time. And you were really the first person to tell me the details about how federal courts are corrupt. We've got this wonderful image of you today preparing to basically give the federal judges the heave-ho. We've got Boasberg here quivering in your grasp as you toss him off the Supreme Court. Of course, we don't want anybody to do any violence to anyone. This is a funny meme, Larry. We're not actually going to hurt
Right.
anyone. But what is it that you would say can be done?
Well, a funny meme, but James Boasberg is hardly funny. Okay. And he is perhaps the poster boy. There's poster girls now, too, in various states. Some of them have even been arrested. They're not federal judges. This was a state judge recently. And my hat's off to Attorney General Pam Bondi and to Kash Patel, the FBI, for finally holding some judges accountable to the rule of law. We, of course, do at Freedom Watch. But it is a acute, it's an extreme situation. It's getting worse and worse. There have been nearly 200 lawsuits filed against Trump and his administration. They're usually filed, nearly always filed, in very leftist districts of this country, circuits, places like Boston, places like Seattle, like Chicago, and others. And they draw judges. And of course, they're supposed to be assigned cases randomly, but we know, Jason, that they're not assigned randomly. Boasberg wound up with the last 4 cases dealing with Trump, and he's the chief judge. So it's obviously he was assigning cases to himself. You're involved in one of them as an amicus. And this is the situation in the federal courts. And I've been talking about it for my entire career. And let's go back a little bit. Back before I started Judicial Watch in 1994, I appeared before a federal judge in Los Angeles, California, by the name of William D. Keller. Interestingly enough, he was appointed by Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan, in my view, was a great president, one of the greatest in modern history. I would rank him and Trump right up there with each other for different reasons. Well, I appeared before him on behalf of a Taiwanese businessman. I was practicing international trade law at the time in a court case involving trademarks. His gay importer and others that this particular judge hated. I mean, he was a bigot. He also didn't like Jews. And of course, I'm Messianic, I'm a Jewish Christian, but that didn't stop him. He called me Mr. Schmuckler. And of course, the name Schmuck in Yiddish is the foreskin of a penis, I hate to say, on TV. I had a real working over. I moved to disqualify the guy. And he said to me, he stood me up, he said, when this case is over, Klayman, we're going to try you. And he did. And I got up there and I gave like a Richard Nixon type speech, harking back to my grandparents and everything else. He fined me $20,000
What? For what?
because I challenged him, because I challenged his bias and prejudice against my clients. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said to myself, when I can, I'm going to start an organization to watch judges. And I did that, walking down the streets of Georgetown. I was walking in front of an athletic shoe store at the time, and it came to me what the name would be. It would be Judicial Watch. And I founded that. I'm the founder. That was my concept. And then I decided not just watch judges, not just hold them accountable. And of course, William D. Keller was a federal judge in the Central District of California. I said, we'll use the courts to keep the other 2 branches of government honest. Of course, in those days, you're going back, frankly, a little more than 31 years. You have a situation where things aren't as bad as they are today. So when people ask me today, what do you do, Larry? I say, well, I try to keep the government and the judiciary, federal judiciary in particular, less dishonest. And that's where we are. And you're seeing it with President Trump. He basically has drawn these hateful, these frankly lawless judges out of the woodwork. Also, he's drawn others out of the woodwork too, insofar as he's been subject to weaponization, as many conservative and Republican activist lawyers have as well, including yours truly, with the District of Columbia Bar and the New York Bar. They've persecuting anybody who supported Trump. And I've been fighting them for 14 years, the DC Bar, run by leftists, socialists, communists, you name it. It's not an exaggeration. And this is the state of our legal system. So along comes President Trump. He's reelected, and he decides he's going to implement the agenda the people voted for, whether it's with regard to his social agenda to restore sanity to Judeo-Christian values and ethics, or whether it's with regard to immigration and deporting illegal immigrants, particularly criminals from gangs like Tren de Aragua and MS-13, and dealing with women in sports, and it goes on and on and on. So these leftist public interest groups and the Democrat Party and others file these cases in federal districts where they get a favorable judge, and they now have enjoined President Trump and his administration in at least 17 major executive actions. It is an outrage. It is a violation of our Constitution. It's usurping executive power. And what makes matters even worse is that 2 or 3 of the judges which President Trump put on the Supreme Court are going along with the leftists up there. And they're submarining what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Because you see, Washington, D.C. is a giant club, Jason. You know, you want to be part of that crowd. You want to go to parties in Georgetown. You want to be accepted. And consequently, even President Trump's own Supreme Court justice, some of them, Coney Barrett, and to some extent, Kavanaugh, for example, takes the easy route to be part of that crowd because they believe that they're there for life. And in fact, they're not. They serve for good behavior. We can talk about that. But that's the state of our legal profession today. It is the most corrupt profession in the United States. President Trump has also taken action against large bag-carrying law firms, particularly in Washington, D.C., that worked against him, that tried to remove him. It was the right thing to do. And even some Republican judges have enjoined him from taking action. He threw the AP, the Associated Press, out of the press room. The Associated Press is ultra-leftist. It is anti-Semitic. In fact, Israel bombed its building in Gaza, told them to get out first, and leveled it. And a Trump-appointed judge, Trevor McFadden, the other day, orders that the AP be allowed back in the press room. There's no right to be there. They can watch TV, they can listen to the radio, they can do whatever they want, but they don't have to be there to harass President Trump. So the guy is sticking his neck out. He may have what the left claims are low favorability ratings. I don't believe that at all, but he's doing what he thinks is right. And those favorability ratings will go through the roof ultimately, because I do believe he'll be successful, but he needs Freedom Watch to back him up as his hamburger helper, so to speak, is complimentary to the Justice Department of Pam Bondi. I hope to meet with her in the near future and others in Washington, D.C. We have started a Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability, which is like a DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency, to take strong action against judges, federal judges in particular, who violate the law, and to get a group of advisors and others knowledgeable in how corrupt the legal profession has become to propose changes that hopefully will be put into effect in law. And we also have, of course, our citizens' grand juries, where we will be seeking the indictments of some federal judges. Not all of federal judges are bad. There's some good ones, but they're few and far between because they're put on the bench through grease, political grease, campaign contributions, and other forms of legal and otherwise types of bribery. So this is what we do. We have a big task in front of us. We have to play a role because 95% or more of the lawyers at the Justice Department would like to slit the throat of Pam Bondi, figuratively, if not literally. She's had to fire a couple of them because they went into court and took positions contrary to the Trump administration. And this is the state of affairs with regard to the federal judiciary. So, when I gave you a proposed title and you changed it, I think you actually improved it. But mine was message to federal judges: shape up or ship out. So apparently your meme shows
You're giving them the heave-ho, Larry.
Jonesburg taking an involuntary swan dive. Okay.
Yeah. And to reiterate, we don't support violence. This is just a
Correct.
figurative political cartoon illustrating. I mean, Larry, you're right to be fed up, And I mean, I'm glad that you and I have had this long relationship and we've done all kinds of things together. You taught me about grand juries and all this sort of stuff. I've told everybody you're like my Mr. Miyagi. And just to slightly correct, they haven't yet ruled on my amicus brief. I did use a 59E motion for reconsideration to compel Boasberg to put my motion seeking leave on the docket. He initially wouldn't even let me petition the government to ask if I could enter the case. Now he's let that sit there, but he hasn't ruled on it. I don't know if I got a chance to tell you this. Did I tell you that I figured out why he did that?
Yeah, tell me why again.
Well, because that all happened in the beginning of April, and the 59E motion was granted on April 9th. His response granting my motion seeking leave to file was entered on the docket, or excuse me, he wrote, granted, entered, and terminated on April 9th, but the motion didn't show up. And I didn't realize this until 5 days later. I called the clerks and said, hey, where is it? And they said, oh, we'll put it on there later. I said, no, you got to put it on there now because you're violating my constitutional rights and now you're violating a court order. They freaked out, hung up the phone. I started writing a petition for a writ of mandamus. And before I got finished writing that, they entered it on the docket on April 14th. The critical thing is, on April 10th, there was a hearing in Boasberg's courtroom, and at that hearing, they set the contempt trap that is now ready to spring. A bunch of declarations were entered from Pete Hegseth and John Radcliffe, and I think also Tulsi Gabbard. And then there's already been some motions where they're saying, oh, here's their declaration, but they deleted the messages. These messages automatically delete. So they basically have set up these members of President Trump's cabinet where now Boasberg is ready to hit them with contempt. And then obviously the Washington Post and the Atlantic and all of these, toilet paper rags will run stories ad nauseum about how Donald Trump's cabinet is in contempt of court and they're texting and they have to resign. And then they're just going to beat that drum like crazy. And if Boasberg had allowed my amicus motion on the docket on the 9th. On the 10th, all those newspapers, everybody in the public in the galley would have seen it, and it would have become a topic at the hearing. Now, it essentially doesn't matter because this contempt trap is set and they're going to find them in contempt. But it does leave a mystery, Larry, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about this.
Yeah, the mystery is, Jason, and it'll play out, and you're doing a great thing there. But they do what they want to do. Okay?
But wait,
they don't care.
The mystery. Why would Hegseth's defense attorneys not say, hey, wait a minute, look at this guy's legal theory. He's right. We should file a motion to dismiss based on all of this. They haven't done that. They're allowing the contempt trap to play out.
Who are those lawyers?
I have the documents over here. They're DOJ lawyers. I'll get it to you.
Well, let me tell you, give me an example of where we are right now. We'll shift a little bit in the focus. Okay. That's what I was telling you about DOJ lawyers. They're not necessarily loyal to the Trump administration. I have a lawsuit, and it's come out recently. Some Democrat prominent journalists have now blown the whistle, not that we needed that it was a cover-up in the left-wing media and in mainstream media. I hate to say legacy media. It gives them too much credit. It's kind of like woke. It doesn't mean anything. It's mainstream leftist media that Biden was competent physically and mentally to be president. Well, I brought a case in Florida in state court. It's progressing against Joe Biden, against Kamala Harris, against Jill Biden, and the White House doctor that certified Biden's health. I brought it as a Florida voter and citizen. Florida has very strong voter laws, and it's for fraud. Well, just recently, who came in to defend Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Kamala Harris, but the Trump Justice Department under the
What?
Westfall Act. So the way the law is written today, this needs to be removed, is that you have to spend your taxpayer dollars, rather than spending your taxpayer dollars, give them the Freedom Watch at freedomwatchusa.org to defend these criminals. Okay. Our money is being spent through Trump's own Justice Department. And that tells you that Pam Bondi does not have control, to any great extent of her own Justice Department. And that's why you need Freedom Watch. And I want to meet with her and talk to her about this, because the same thing happened when George W. Bush was elected president after Clinton and Gore, is that we had all these cases at Judicial Watch. We had Filegate, we had Travelgate, we had Chinagate. And I went to the then Attorney General, John Ashcroft, and I said, why don't we settle these things? And got no response. And it continued on with the same Democrat hack lawyers in the federal program branch of the Justice Department, a guy named James Gilligan. He should have been on Gilligan's Island, for that matter. A lot of our listeners or viewers are probably too young to remember that. But this is how our legal system is basically, so excuse the French, effed up. So what you're seeing there with the Trump Justice Department doesn't surprise me at all. And that's why we need Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability, much like DOJ, to clean this up. And I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org. Please contribute. We're going to have prominent people involved. I'm meeting with many of them recently already. Alan Keyes, former UN ambassador, former presidential candidate, is one of our advisors. There are others, and I'll announce them shortly. But we need your strong financial support. So let me shift a little bit here, if I may, is that lawfare is being waged by the left, by the socialists, the communists, the atheists, the radical blacks, members of the Marxian Jewish left. These, by the way, are not exemplary of Jewish people. These are Marxists, and most Jewish people despise them and want them gone, figuratively. But this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the LGBTQ radical community, with transgenderism, everything else. All these radical groups are now banding together. And now, just in the last few days, and I predicted this, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, and Cory Booker, that clown senator from New Jersey, have talked about violence against the American people, along with that, excuse the French again, fat pig, that governor, Pritzker, from Illinois, advocating violence to solve what they consider to be, Trump's presidency and him taking all these actions. So this is why we need to band together. As Benjamin Franklin said, either we all hang together or together we will hang. Look at these miscreants. Look at these people. Disgusting people. Yeah. And they want to destroy us. Frankly, they'd like to see us dead. They are fomenting violence. You can expect probably more assassination attempts against President Trump, maybe against Vice President Vance. God forbid. We pray that will not happen. But this is what these people are doing. They did it once, and I believe that the other two assassination attempts were an inside job, either through affirmative action, in the true sense of the word affirmative, or by not giving President Trump adequate security so someone would take a crack at him, either from the regime in Iran, which it was rumored they had sent hitmen, or others. And to this day, we know little to nothing about these assassins.
Yeah, and Larry, if I can expand on that, we've got just a few more minutes, and then we're going to be going to a sponsor exclusive segment. People are going to be able to join us, on your Substack. People can follow you on Substack now, Larry. I don't know if we've mentioned that today, but on the Freedom Watch Substack, you will get a simulcast of this upcoming video. And with regard to what you're saying about the assassinations, Larry, I've become almost like my own little Freedom Watch, inspired by you. I've got a separate lawsuit going against the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office, and we had our first hearing in court the other day in Pittsburgh. They are suing to prevent giving me evidence that would help us understand how they identified the body on the roof as Thomas Crooks. The official story is that the FBI went to his father's house and said, "Hey, your son is dead on the roof, and we know that because he had your rifle with your serial number on it." Now, that is certainly not a forensic identification of the body, and there's no records of DNA or how they found out it was Thomas Crooks. And I don't know if you know this, Larry, Crooks has a very distinctive cartilage nodule on the outer, what's called helix of his right ear, and it's visible in videos of Thomas Crooks from social media when he's alive. It's superimposed on the photo of the dead guy on the roof that was provided to Chuck Grassley in a report. I determined that by doing my own right to know action against the police. They've refused to give the original photo, which, if I'm incorrect, would prove me wrong. They've refused to give that photo. And then when we got the autopsy from the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office, the right ear of the dead subject was cropped out of the photo. And even though this was an anatomically unique feature, it is not mentioned at all in the autopsy, highly suggestive that the dead body did not include that unique anatomical feature. And now the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office is fighting me in court to prevent the public from learning the truth about who was autopsied on that roof. What do you think of that?
Well, not surprising, Jason. And kudos to you for doing that, because they're not even telling President Trump. He made reference to that recently. He has no idea who these people are. This is the deep state. The deep state is out to get him. They're out to get Vice President Vance. They're out to get the cabinet. They're out to get Elon Musk. And who knows what their motivation is. And look, President Trump just released what we thought were going to be a panoply of documents with regard to the assassination of John F. Kennedy Jr. We learned little to nothing. Most of those documents that will probably implicate, as everyone believes, the CIA in arranging for the assassination of John F. Kennedy no longer exist, much like the documents of the J6 committee no longer exist. You cannot believe anything that you are told by our so-called government. And do not think that President Trump is in total control of this government. He is not. And this is why you need a Freedom Watch. It's why you need a Larry Klayman. It's why you need people that actually bring hard-hitting cases in citizens' grand juries, not just those who get documents, and freedom of information. That's important too. But you got to use those documents. And we've got to take action ourselves with the citizens' grand juries, with the citizens' trials, with the citizens' convictions, with the sentencing, with citizens' arrests, not to be violent, but to be peaceful and legal. We have to hold people accountable because our government internally, the deep state, has got a bullseye on President Trump and Vice President Vance and us by extension. By the way, my congratulations to Pam Bondi. She's fearless. I really appreciate that. I really want to collaborate with her on what she's doing. Having locked up 2 judges, that's the best thing that is done.
That is good, I have to admit.
They send a message, and now they're scared. They've always been scared. And again, nobody's advocating violence, but the fact is they need to be held to the rule of law. They're not above the law. So you have Kamala Harris saying, "Oh my God, they charged and locked up a judge." Well, you know what, Kamala? You should be locked up. You should be. Okay, you're former Attorney General of California, and you have subverted the law. So, we need to hold people accountable. That's the bottom line, and we are at great peril. And I pray for President Trump, his cabinet, the people around them. I pray for ourselves and our loved ones, because these leftists, you can see it in the last few days, whether it's Hakeem Jeffries or whether it's Cory Booker or whether it's so-called Governor Pritzker of Illinois, or whether it's Tim Walz, who's a complete overstuffed clown, but he also says stuff that incites violence, or whether you see Michelle Obama, who, is spewing forth, frankly, all kinds of stuff because she's about ready to get divorced from Barack, or maybe they're just cheating on each other. Who knows? Who knows who she's cheating with? Probably another man, frankly. Well, who knows what? But in her case, but
the Sasquatch.
but Now, she's giving interviews saying that this is all racist against blacks. She's whipping up racial violence. The whole immigration thing, in her eyes, is all about black people, racist. So they're doing it again, and we live in very, very dangerous times.
Yeah. Now, Larry, we're going to head over to our sponsor exclusive segment. People are going to be able to join us there on larryklayman.substack.com. Don't forget to visit freedomwatchusa.org. You can also get the Substack of the simulcast of the broadcast that will be on Larry's Substack on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. Larry, I've got a lot of interesting stuff to share with you on the other side. You would love this comment that I got when I was leaving the Allegheny courthouse the other day. One of the viewers said, Jason is doing more than Judicial Watch. And I knew you would like that when the person said that. So,
after I left.
After you left, yes. Now Tom Fitton just goes to the gym and then makes videos about how he got documents. But we'll be back in 5 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Larry's going to stick around, and we got a lot to talk about. I'm going to tell you who those lawyers are. And I think you were trying to tell us that it is a little weird that they haven't filed a motion to dismiss. We'll get into those details. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be